Hello, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to another episode of Blockchain and Beyond. As always, I'm your host Farzan. So, today is the first episode of the year 2023, and this will probably be uploaded on the 1st of January at some point. And this is a bit different to what I had planned to do, but today I want to just do like a recap of my experience of hosting this podcast, of the crypto industry as a whole, and what I'm kind of looking forward to going forwards. So I guess we can sort of start with the state of the crypto space. So I guess the biggest thing is has been the bear market this year, and in the years leading up to now, there has been a massive bull run. Prices have gone crazy for all assets, and I think now is again a time for us, for the ecosystem as a whole to filter out projects and understand which projects actually have weight going forwards. We also saw the explosion of a lot of trading firms or cryptocurrency platforms. We had a lot to do with Free Arrows Capital. We had a lot to do with Luna and Terra. I think that was probably the most prolific thing earlier in the year, and now it's probably more about FTX. And this has all come as a result of one, the bear market, and two, leverage trading. So a lot of these firms, and obviously this is not financial advice, I'm not, a trader or anything, but by using leverage, you expose yourself a lot more to price movements. And I guess that's the whole point behind it. But without proper risk management, you put yourself at the risk of being liquidated, which is what, partially what we saw with 3AC and what we're currently seeing with FTX and Alameda Research, where they had all of these funds which they were leverage trading on. There were even attempts to manipulate the market in subtle ways. But due to leverage, that's where it collapsed, because they lost a lot of value. They could not find more collateral to put up, because the lenders during this market don't want to be lending to anyone, because they're unsure of the future of the market. Will the market continue to go down? Will it go up? They have very little confidence in the market, so they're not going to be there to help prop up all of these other companies. The other big thing was, obviously, Terra and Luna. So obviously Luna had their stablecoin UST, and there was a massive vicious cycle of people trying to cash out and UST being depegged, and this was all down to like absurd interest payments that they were promising. UST was promising 20% returns on a stablecoin, which is highly unrealistic. And once the events kind of unfolded, we able to identify that a lot of the money was them using other customers' deposits as a means to pay people this 20% interest. And I think it was because of that, once people caught a whiff of what was going on and people started to withdraw their money, all of a sudden the Luna Foundation, didn't have any value they didn't have any money to pay back people. So they effectively had a crypto version of a bank run, which is quite crazy to think of. But at the same time, it was a risk highlighted or a risk identified by some people. It is part of the algorithm of the stablecoin, how the stablecoin worked. It was meant to be a self-balancing system, but without the natural demand for it. And I think the stablecoin system could have really worked, as we have seen with other stablecoins like DAI, which is a collateral backed stablecoin. The same could have been done with UST, but it failed because the Luna Foundation were offering 20% interest on stablecoins, which is completely absurd and random, in my opinion. But that's enough about that one. We've seen the collapse of a lot of other things. I think Celsius was the other big one. This was a custodial platform, so they have your keys and they pay you interest on all of your crypto, whether that's Bitcoin, Ethereum, any stable coins, all sorts. They kind of give you interest towards it. And I think a lot of people got burnt here as well, because as the markets decided to turn down or head downwards, Celsius would actually lend out these coins to other platforms and other traders who were then impacted by the market downturn because they were leverage trading. And then all of a sudden, these traders cannot pay Celsius back. And when they can't pay Celsius back, Celsius can't pay their customers or their creditors back. So what that means is Celsius just basically shut down their operations for a while, and a lot of people lost their money. A lot of people lost access to their money, which again isn't exactly a positive thing. A lot of people lost a lot of money. A lot of people had a lot of faith in these traditional systems, which showed to be unreliable. And there's other companies which have suffered similar fates. I think BlockFi was one of them. Some, I believe, Voyager, and even places like I want to say it's Gemini or Kraken. I think it's Gemini. One of those places had a lot of issues with their funding and paying back their customers. So there's quite a lot going on in the industry right now. I think the other big one that we saw was obviously FTX, the collapse of FTX. FTX was perhaps one of the second biggest cryptocurrency exchange behind places like Binance. They had a lot of volume. I think in fees they were doing, I want to say around 10 million. I did some napkin math quite a while ago. So I'm not sure, how relevant it still was, at the time of the collapse of FTX, where they had a really good cash flowing business, but due to leverage trading and the misuse of customer funds, not only did they collapse, but a lot of people lost their money. There's estimates upwards of 7 billion, which is quite a lot to think about. Yeah, so that's the other big one. And then I think a lot of people have definitely lost trust in what I want to call like tradfi, so traditional finance institutes, where your assets are custodied by them and not by yourself. And I think there are perhaps some positives that we can take away from all of this. The biggest one being is, from my perspective at least, is like, don't leverage trade, especially if you don't know what you're doing or you don't have proper risk controls. I'm not a trader. I don't, leverage trade. I don't really believe in it. So, that's not something that I do. But, a lot of people in this space are, privy to it. So, of course, we need to, keep that in mind. And the other thing is to do with self-custody. Some of my friends lost money in FTX, people I know in real life, people I talk to every day. And it hurts, it's sad that, they've put money and trust in these platforms and they've lost it. But I guess this is where the push for self-custody actually comes in. I've been self-custodying for a very long time. Probably, quite early on in my crypto career, I saw it as the best way forward and the best way for me to keep going. So I, invested in a hardware wallet, I've got my backups, and the rest of it. And, because of that, I've not had any issues, trying to access my funds, or losing access to them. So, it's a necessary precaution. And I hope that, one thing people can take away from the events of this year are, if you self-custody, your assets are much safer. And yes, there is some more friction if you want to sell them or if you want to, exchange them for something else. But I think that's a price that you should be willing to pay because, as an individual, you're a lot more conscious about sitting down and actually sending these transactions. You have to think about what you're doing and you can't just press a few buttons and it's done. So it makes you think about what you're doing and it's also just a lot safer, right? So now I'm going to jump to the topic of this podcast. So this has been the first full year of me doing my podcast, Blockchain and Beyond, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Um, the biggest thing that I'm proud of is the consistency that I've been able to maintain with this. I've missed very few episodes this year. I have a schedule in my mind of uploading once a week at the very least, and I've stuck to that for the most part. There was a few weeks at the end of or middle of November and a little bit early December when I stopped uploading for a few weeks. That was because I was out on holiday with my family. I wanted to at the time I didn't have the capacity to actually pre-record any episodes, and I just want some time to spend with family. We went abroad, we saw family we haven't seen in 5-6 years, so the podcast was probably a lot lower on my priority list. One thing that I really do appreciate about this podcast is the people I get to speak to. And if anyone I've ever spoke to on my podcast is actually listening to this, you've probably heard this before, but I truly appreciate the time that people take out to sit down and speak with me, because these people are busy and I value everyone's time. Everyone is busy, everyone has a million and one things going on in their lives, but the fact that these people choose to sit down with me, they reply to my Twitter DMs, they reply to my emails, they schedule some time, they sit down, they talk about what they're building. I get to know them a bit more as a person. I get to see their passion through the way they talk. It's honestly like really amazing for me, and I really value that like connection that you make with people. So that's probably the biggest thing that I really enjoy with this podcast. And the second biggest thing is probably gonna be more to do with the range of topics that I get to cover, right? I generally talk a lot about Algorand, which is a cryptocurrency which I'm, very much a big fan of. But then it's also, how it pushes technology. So, Falcon keys, before, if I wasn't doing this podcast, I would probably have never come across and researched Falcon keys as I have done, right? Or how pure proof of stake works, or how verifiable random functions work. None of this stuff would have occurred to me as things that I need to, look into or understand about, blockchain, or the different functionalities about blockchains, or how nodes work. Do we need node incentives? What are the impacts of having node incentives and not having node incentives? That's probably the biggest takeaways. And overall, it's just a super enjoyable experience for me. I get to sit down, I get to talk. It has improved me in, I want to say, my professional life, and even like talking to people. It having a podcast gives you something to talk about. It helps you push yourself as someone who knows something about this area, especially an area that I'm trying to break into. And I've been working with a few projects on different things, some smaller projects, some bigger projects, so hopefully that will come into fruition in 2023. And this podcast has been a way for me to leverage my knowledge going forwards effectively. I guess the next thing I want to talk about is what's next for this podcast. I'm not quitting, that's for sure. But I've been thinking about this a lot. What do I want to do with this podcast going forwards? What are my goals? What are my ambitions for it? For the next few episodes, one will be about proof of reserves. One will be about how I would go about learning about blockchain again. And I want to hopefully approach from a slightly technical viewpoint, but also a non-technical viewpoint, because I would consider myself a technical person, but I don't really have the willpower or the ability to do a lot of deep coding or writing smart contracts. It's something that I would like to do more of in the future, perhaps, if I can find the discipline within myself to sit down and do it. But the big thing that I want to do is speak to more people. There are so many projects in the crypto space. There are so many projects, there's so many people who are building cool things that are pushing the limits of what are possible. There's a lot of projects that I'm super interested in. So obviously, my big interest projects are BTC, CRO, Algorand, obviously, PYR is the other one, which is Vulcan Forged, which is, and the Elysium blockchain, which is coming in 2023. And and I'm missing one thing else. XRP I'm quite interested in. So there's a lot of people that I want to speak to in these areas, who can hopefully offer some really deep insight. And a lot of these people have a lot of experience, they have a lot of knowledge, and I want to hopefully try speak to them, learn from them, and then also teach you guys and bring you guys on for the ride, because that's always been the aim, is to teach people about blockchain, to understand the technology, and perhaps move away from what the media may portray in the day-to-day. And yeah, I guess the other thing that I really want to improve on for this podcast is the video aspect of it, whether that's sharing my screen, whether that's overlays, whether that's thumbnails, whether that's with how my guests are presented. Currently, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see a new sort of overlay. It's not much, it's something I'm working on, and hopefully something I can develop a bit more. And the same goes for when I have guests on, to make them feel welcome, increase the production quality of this podcast, whether that means getting a green screen, whether that means getting a better camera. I recently bought a camera. I just need to figure out how to actually properly apply it to my PC and make the video quality good, because I do have some issues with it, but that's something that I will sort out. Right now I'm playing around with using my phone as a webcam. Phone cameras are usually really high quality anyway, so they can replace a traditional webcam if you're not using a professional camera. So overall, I want the production quality of this to go up, whether that's the audio as well. I do have a good mic. I think I need to spend some time figuring out how I can make my audio perhaps a lot smoother, reduce some of the background noises, whether that means getting a pop filter, and so be it. But that's something that I want to look at doing more of. And yeah, there's not a whole lot more that I want to actually talk about. I just think now is probably a good time to do my thank yous to everyone who's listened to this podcast. It means the world to me. When I started this just over a year ago, I was super scared. I was like, is anyone gonna actually listen to this? Does anyone care about this? And it comes down to just putting yourself out there and telling people what you do, and eventually people will come, people will listen, people will stay for your content, they'll stay for your personality. Sorry, that was just the doorbell. Yeah, so when I started it, I wasn't sure if anyone was going to listen, and now looking at what stats that I can gather, my first episode is probably my most listened to episode, which is crazy to think about, because that was probably the one I was least confident about, that I didn't have the the most experience with. I had not spoken to any guests. I was using a little random mic. There was very little post editing going on. Even now, there's very little post editing going on. But it was probably one of my most raw episodes. And the fact that it's my most listened to one is still kind of crazy to me. And I've had some in the middle which have gained traction, which I really appreciate. So if anyone is still at this point listening, or if you ever listen to any of my podcasts, like, just a massive thank you, because that's what it's been about from the start, is teaching people, helping people understand about blockchain and the impact that it can have on our future. And yeah, and I honestly think that's probably it at this point. So just for a little wrap up, it's been an awesome year. We've done 50 plus podcasts, like 54. This might be like 55, and potentially a 56th one coming today as well, or rather tomorrow, which is going to be the 1st of January. Yeah, and I've really enjoyed it. I've spoken to amazing people. I've learned so much. It's pushed my knowledge more than I would have imagined. It's opened doors in my professional life that I would not have imagined either. Yeah, and I want to go into 2023, with the mindset of making this podcast bigger and better, and reaching out to more people, putting more time into it, because it is a craft, and you need to put time, and you need to nourish it, and you need to cherish it to actually get it to where you want it to be. So yeah, until next time, I guess that's it. Thank you and goodbye.